Hey, everybody, welcome to another Common Sanctuary conversation. My name is Matt Nightingale, and I am the founder and executive director of Common Sanctuary. And we like to have these conversations at the intersection of faith and conversation, however often we can. And these conversations are really important. I founded this nonprofit just a little over 3 years ago. In fact, it was the 19th, just this last Wednesday, that we celebrated our 3-year anniversary. So I'm super grateful for that, and so grateful for all of you who are supporting this ministry nonprofit financially. Some of you are monthly donors, some of you give occasionally. I'm so grateful for that. And some of you pay for spiritual direction services or support groups, but you help keep us moving forward. And I'm really grateful for that support. These conversations are always fun for me. I love getting to talk with people who are right here at that intersection of faith and sexuality. And today's conversation is actually really meaningful to me. I was looking back at the guest list of people I've talked to over these couple of years, and it was hard for me to believe, but this is actually the first person I've talked to who has such a similar profile to mine, somebody who was in a mixed orientation marriage for a long time. And so I'm going to go ahead and read his bio to you. We'll be talking today to a man named Matt Heincker. Matt is the son of a Nazarene pastor who grew up all over the United States. He spent more than 3 decades of his life wrestling with his faith and sexuality, and eventually came out at 38 years old. He then went through a divorce and also a painful breakup from his church and Christian community. Through a period of deconstruction and reconstruction of what he believed, he emerged a healed and whole queer person of faith and rebuilt his life. His journey is chronicled in his memoir podcast, Through the Long Night, a man's journey out of darkness and into the technicolored light of love and peace. He also co-hosts a podcast series entitled How to Find and Keep a Gay Man. Both are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you access your podcasts. He and his husband, Ty, founded a nonprofit called the Technicolor Project, helping queer people of faith build lives of freedom and peace. And they tell their story together as well. He and Ty have 6 children and live and thrive together in Indianapolis, Indiana. He can be found on Instagram at Matthew Heincker and How to Find and Keep a Gay Man. So let's welcome to the conversation, Matt Heincker. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
Glad to have
Hello.
you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. Thank you.
Of course. So I guess ostensibly the reason you're here is because of this podcast, Through the Long Night. A lot of people have been listening to it in all of the work that I do in support groups and one-on-one kind of sessions with gay men or queer men who are married to women in this kind of phenomenon we call mixed orientation marriages. And I work with lots and lots of people like this. All of a sudden, your name started popping up and people were like, have you heard this? Have you heard this? And they were sharing it with me. And I'm like, oh, I know that guy actually. So this thing has really been popular and it's been coming to my attention a lot. And I actually hadn't listened to it. And so one day I put it on and I have to say I was riveted. I thought it was an absolutely beautiful podcast. It was very moving, very profound. So congratulations on the reach that it's had, on the way that has impacted so many people. I'd love for you to share a little bit about the podcast itself to start.
Sure. Yeah, I always, when I was coming out and kind of going through deconstruction and the really difficult steps that I had to make in my life, one of the pivotal moments for me was actually B.T. Harmon's Blue Babies Pink, which is a similar format. And it was a light in the darkness for me to hear someone tell their story that was so similar to mine. And I knew that at some point when I had, the time and space and was healed enough, I wanted to do that myself. Because I feel a deep responsibility. When I look at my life where it is now, I feel a deep responsibility to help others who've walked the same road. And so that was really what it was born out of, just a burden to do that. And it was a passion project. It was written and produced over about a year's time. And it was really cathartic for me to write and really fully process the full journey, really, heal from a lot of the things that I don't think I'd ever really, gotten all the way through. And so it was a really healing, life-giving thing for me to do. And it has, to your point, had a much further reach already than I anticipated. People from all over the world. It's had about 30,000 downloads in about 10 weeks now. And I'm connecting with all kinds of people in our community and hopefully doing my part to lift us all up, and so it's been really beautiful to be a part of that in some way.
Tell this audience a little bit about the format of the podcast. How many episodes? How long can people expect to listen if they decide to try it out?
Yeah, so probably the hardest part of making this project was boiling my entire life down into 23 12-minute or less episodes. So they're in snippets, and it really is a memoir. It's from birth to today. And I really focused on the major fence post moments that molded kind of who I became over time, and also the really difficult part of reaching the place that I have now in my life through a complete deconstruction of not only my faith but my entire life. And I was as open, uncomfortably honest in it. I still have a little bit of an emotional hangover knowing that so many of these details about my life are everywhere.
Yeah.
But I really felt like it was important for me to be as honest and raw as I could, so people could be helped by it and encouraged by it if they saw themselves in the same story.
And you mentioned that it's been heard by people all over the world. Do you have any stories of people who've reached out or anything that stands out to you?
I spoke to a mother in Finland whose son came out. There's a ton of people in Australia randomly that have been listening to it, and that I've counseled with one-on-one. I've met a few people in South America, as well as all over the U.S. And 90% of them men in mixed orientation marriages that are really suffering and not really sure what to do, or people that have walked the full process that I have and have lost so much in that process that it's almost affirming to them to hear the story for themselves, And I think that people that have walked the road that you and I have, Matt, regardless of where we're at in the world, we have to be a tight-knit community and uplift each other. Yeah. It's important. There's so many things that we cannot explain to anyone else that we all know. And so it's been beautiful to connect with other people that have been through that too.
It takes me back to 2016. My former wife and I were given the opportunity to do a TEDx talk about our story of my coming out and our divorce, our choosing to divorce. And it was such a kind of random thing that we were given this opportunity, which is different from yours, obviously, because you chose to make this podcast. But in releasing this into the world, I was just kind of inundated with people on Facebook Messenger, people texting me, people finding me through social media and saying, like, I thought I was the only one. It is such an isolating, such a lonely road to walk when you are the queer spouse in a mixed orientation marriage. And you really do, for so much of that time, think, I'm the only one. You think you're going crazy. And so in the wake of releasing that TED Talk into the world, so many people reached out, and I was really moved and blessed and happy to kind of walk with people, even informally at first, before I began doing anything in a formal way through support groups and through spiritual direction and so forth. And I did find my way into these communities that I did not even know existed, of people either who had been married to women or who currently were married to women. Isn't it amazing the thousands of people who are in these kinds of marriages?
Yeah, it's shocking. Yeah. But we're not alone.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Just briefly, you have two podcasts. Tell us about the other one as well.
I do. So the memoir piece is really kind of a standalone thing. That's been a lot of fun, but I actually recorded that on break from my regular series that I co-host with a dear friend of mine. His name is Matt Bays. He's a talented musician, artist, and writer who lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. He and I are dear friends, and he was actually in a mixed orientation marriage for over 20 years himself. So he and I, as we came out and started dating, which we're going to get into that, I guess, a little bit later, but all the challenges that go along with that, we both eventually found really incredible people to rebuild our lives with and to marry. And so we kind of looked around us in our community. We're new in this community, this crazy gay community, and see that for a lot of reasons, people are relationally not in a good place. You don't see a lot of thriving, monogamous, thriving marriages in our community. And so we developed the topic, the title, How to Find and Keep a Good Man. How do you find someone worth loving, worth giving yourself to? And then how do you maintain that relationship? And how does that thrive over time? And that is a countercultural topic of discussion in the gay community for whatever reason. And so it's been really interesting to challenge a lot of the stereotypes that exist within it and to maybe suggest a different path or a different perspective towards maybe a more life-giving or whole way to live in relationship with another man. So we've explored those themes, and that's reached a pretty large audience too. Turns out a lot of people want to know how to find and keep a gay man. So that's been an ongoing passion project of ours. We finished season 1 at the end of last year, and season 2 just started a couple of weeks ago. So that is it's a fun thing to tune into as well, especially if you're dating, trying to figure out how that looks in this new world.
Yeah. Strange that there are so many Matts who are now on this side of the closet door who used to be married to women.
It is.
Anyway, yeah. So why don't you kind of take us through? I mean, the podcast is beautiful and it speaks for itself. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening to me to download it, listen to it. We don't want to give away the whole story on this conversation today. Okay, we've got lots of things to talk about. So I don't want you to tell your whole life story here. But can you maybe walk us through, I don't know, take a little bit of time and kind of give us the highlights of the Matt Heincker story?
Well, it really, I like you said in my bio, I grew up son of a Nazarene minister in uber fundamentalist, conservative evangelical family. And my family, they were great parents. I had a great family life, but I grew up in that really strict environment, and at a very young age knew that I was different somehow and knew that that was not a good thing. And so a lot of it is, yet I was introduced to a faith experience, yet I was introduced to music in the church, yet I became a very devout Christian in that process, and a lot of that was very authentic and real. And yet I wrestle with this really scary part of me that I know is real, that I'm told is sinful and bad. And so really it starts at a very young age and kind of shows how at different chapters in my life, I was always wrestling with this and always felt like I was doing so in isolation, in fear, in shame, in a lot of pain. And yet the really complicated other side of it was I was being raised by parents who loved me in a safe environment, and my faith began to grow and was also a real part of my life and who I was. So the constant tension of those two things that I lived in, really the extremes of them both, is really just talked about in detail at each stage of my life until I reached a breaking point that cost me everything and required me to make major changes, make impossible decisions that affected everyone that I love. And it was through that complete breakdown that I sat in the rubble and had to figure out what my faith looked like moving forward. And I was forced to do the very scary thing of rebuilding my life and believing that I'd made the right decision, believing that there was still hope for my future as a queer person of faith, and chronicling all the fear, the pain, the joy, the good and the bad that went along with that whole thing. And then at the end, I really kind of share the summarization of really where I have landed, processing that whole journey. And that's really, in a nutshell, what it kind of encapsulates.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the acknowledgement, and you really do a good job of kind of exploring this in the podcast. But I appreciate, because this is something that I really emphasize in my work, is that it is not simply a black and white binary kind of journey. So many people who come to me want it to be like, oh, my life is so difficult and painful, and if I do, A, B, and C, then it will all be glorious and wonderful, right? They desperately want me to tell them that, and I wish I could, believe me, but that is simply not the way that life works in most cases, right? And so you are acknowledging the really complicated reality of life, that life is complicated, and that there is joy and pain bound up in probably both sides, on both sides of that closet door. There was good and beautiful things before coming out, as well as after, of course, and there's pain in both sides as well. And that is what makes it such a difficult thing for so many of us as we are facing that difficult decision of what do I do? How do I make this decision? How do I move forward? You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I think that ultimately for me, it came down to what is the pain that I am able to live with.
Mm.
That's really kind of what you have to really get clear about before you move forward either way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's switch gears for a minute here and talk about. I went back and looked up the date for when you and I actually met face to face for the first time. It was July 18th, 2019. So we are coming up on 5 years ago, and we met in a support group. You allow me to share this information, so thank you. It was with an organization that I was doing support groups with at the time called the Christian Closet. Amazing organization, mental and spiritual health organization for queer people, queer Christian people, founded by a woman named Candace Zubernat, amazing person. And I was doing support groups with them at the time for mixed orientation marriage. It was the second one that I had ever done, ever. And so you were very much a guinea pig for me. Thank you so much. And it was, I think I look back on it with a lot of like fondness and gratitude for the opportunity to begin doing that work. You were in that group with 3 other men, and yeah, I don't know. Do you want to say anything about that experience? What it was like for you?
It's kind of funny. I didn't even find the organization. My ex-wife did. I mean, we were in a place where things were so difficult. We were looking under every rock to kind of keep our life together. And she found this unique organization, the opportunity to be a part of this group. And I was very, very nervous about it. I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And I think I went into it, and I talk about this in the podcast a little bit, but I went into it hoping to find some magic bullet to keep my life together the way that it was.
Yeah.
And I was so hopeful that that's what I was going to find in that group. And didn't find that, but I found much more. I made, one of the guys in that group is one of my closest friends to this day. And we really walked with each other through both of our paths after that. But I learned that A, I wasn't alone, and B, my story was not unique, and that what I was feeling was legitimate. What I was wrestling with was legitimate.
Yeah.
And I think that was really eye-opening and incredibly life-giving. I felt like I had real support on this journey for the first time in it. And I wouldn't trade that group for the world. It was really a meaningful step for me in my journey.
One of the things that I remember specifically from that group and you specifically is that you did come in very specifically with the idea that you wanted to stay married. You were like, my wife is my best friend. We have built this whole life together. We have a beautiful home and children and I want to stay married. I am gay. I know that. And also I want to stay married and we want to make this work. So help us do that. And I remember one of my kind of hallmarks in these groups and in the people I work with is like, I will not tell you what to do. I will try my best to kind of like present the options honestly and show you my life and what has happened and how that worked. And I will support you whatever path you walk down and try to do it in community and in a loving way. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I remember thinking like, okay, good luck. And I hope, if you can do that, I'm going to support you and love you and help you. And, but I remember kind of just having this concern for you, loving concern, like, all right,
sure.
Whew, I mean, you two were young and these young children. And I was just like, I hope you can,
Yeah.
But, during that time, you and your wife were looking at a lot of different options to try to, make that a possibility for you. Do you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, no, it was an impossible time. So to your point, my ex-wife, Stephanie, we were best friends. I'm very, very grateful that we're still in close relationship to this day. But to your point, I did not want to get divorced. I couldn't imagine life without her. I just knew that I was gay. I was losing my ability to share a bed with a woman. I wanted to present myself as who I finally was clear that I was.
Yeah.
But we had this beautiful life that we built that I had worked so hard for in so many ways, and it meant everything to me. And so we, and thankfully, both her and I were going through a process of deconstruction in our faith,
Yes.
as a result of this journey, and we did it very much together, which I'm thankful for. I think that made all the difference.
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, and so I give her a lot of credit, because I don't think any of this would have gone the way that it did had that not been the case. But in that process, we were kind of like, what do we do? And through counsel that we had in the Christian Closet organization, it was suggested that maybe we, with very strict rules, open up the marriage. I'm allowed to develop a relationship with a safe man, very strict amount of time per month, whatever, all these kind of rules.
Mm-hmm.
But just basically, how do we honor the marriage and the life that you've built, and decide that that's going to be something that we both are going to work to preserve, while allowing you to not only identify as a gay man, but experience relationship with one. And so I was absolutely horrified when that was suggested to us. It was very, very much counterintuitive to how I was raised, and even at the time still believed. And I was very opposed to it. And it took a few months, and through a series of really difficult conversations, we made the decision together to do that. So I, with very strict rules that I won't get into, began to date. And it wasn't long into this process that I made a very significant connection with a man who showed me all that I was missing, basically, and really helped me understand, yes, you are a gay man. You absolutely are. This is how you're wired. You feel peace when you're in a relationship with a man. This is how you are able to experience care and love and affection when it is from a man that you know and trust and love. And in a very short amount of time, I had a pretty significant a relationship built with a man, and it really provided a lot of clarity for both of us, and sped up, that whole process. We talked about this before we filmed today. I'm to this day hesitant to talk about it in detail, because I still am working through a lot of shame, and I don't feel great about the fact that that's what we decided to do, but we did. And I do think in the end, ironically, it was the right thing, because it provided clarity for both of us very quickly. And off we went from there.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And I do understand that it's really tender. It's a really vulnerable thing to share, because because for lots of reasons, in kind of evangelical spaces, that's a really big thing to talk about. Like, oh my gosh, you opened your marriage. That's sinful, right? From that perspective, for sure. But then also just from that's a vulnerable thing to talk about. You and your then wife decided and you were doing it because you wanted to save your marriage. I remember so clearly you talking about that and saying, we're going to try this because we want to see if we can make this work together for the long term. And it was kind of like a Hail Mary pass. We're going to try this last thing and see if it might be able to keep us together for the sake of the children, for the sake of us, for the sake of this whole thing that we've built. This might, and then, yes, ironically, right? Because in the end, what it did was reveal on a very deep level that actually you're created to be in a loving, monogamous relationship with the man, actually.
Absolutely. And I want to interject. I want to interject really quick. I think that when people hear that part of the story, especially people that are not affirming of gay relationships in the church, the reflex is to say, oh, that's because you just wanted to have sex with a man.
Right. Yes.
What I learned in that process is that it was 1,000 times more complicated.
Yes. Or
more complex than just wanting to have a sexual relationship with a man. My soul felt at rest when I was with a man in that way. And I learned I learned the complexity of how I was wired, not just sexually. And so, I think that's a really important part of this as people try to get their head around this journey for people.
I do too, and I appreciate that further clarification, because there, as well as I do, Matt, that all day, every day, non-affirming Christians will say that this being gay is all about sex. I shared
Yeah.
something just the other day on my social media from Justin Lee, who I think is a wonderful kind of champion for gay Christians. And he did a really nice short video about like being gay is not just about sex, because this, and we know this, we've been saying this for generations, but there are still people in Christianity that need to hear it like they're in kindergarten again and again and again and again and again, because they always think it's just about sex and it's just about wanting to scratch that itch, that sexual itch. And it's not. And your experience, and it's interesting because maybe even to a degree, you might have thought it was just about sex. But then you went, oh gosh, actually, no, this is so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger. It's about the way we are designed to live and love and be in relationship. It's so much bigger than just sex, you know?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that part, because yeah, because that then really did accelerate. It was like, oh, actually I'm gay, and here's what that means. It's so much bigger, you know. And it's interesting because I have seen some mixed orientation marriages that are somehow able to stay together with that kind of allowance for opening it up for the queer spouse to be able to have relationship outside of the marriage. But for many people, it's like that is actually the beginning of the end, because they say, oh, actually, that's what I need always, you know, that's actually what I'm designed for. Yeah. Let's pivot to faith stuff. You talk pretty beautifully, I think, in your podcast about that, and we've used the terms a lot here already, even just this afternoon: deconstruction, reconstruction. These are buzzwords right now in Christianity, but they are powerful. And I don't know. I use the word evolving. Like, my faith is evolving. But certainly a lot has been torn down, and when that happens, we have to rebuild, or not. I suppose some people don't ever rebuild, and that's what they decide to do. You have chosen to rebuild. You do have a thriving faith today. Can you talk a little bit about that for you? You know, coming from a really conservative evangelical faith to where you are today, what has that been like for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I talked a little bit about this earlier. I think I understood growing up that my faith in this God that I was being introduced to through music, through prayer, through whatever, was real. I think that there are many times that I was able to not take my own life because I believed that God loved me. So when I made this, and then when, you know, my journey got really more complicated and I was forced to deconstruct my faith, I emerged from that still conscious of the fact that it was still very important to me and very much a part of who I was. And I think that even through the darkest and most difficult parts of my coming out, my divorce, my complete just expulsion from my faith community, I was conscious that God was with me and that His love was real. And so, what do you do at that point? So I just began a process of just taking time to heal and really understand what I knew to be true, what I really felt in my gut to be true at this, throughout my journey, and what does my faith look like moving forward? You say your faith is evolving. I love that term. I'm going to steal that. I think that that's really where I am too. You know, I have a faith practice. Prayer is very important to me. I talk a lot about how central music was for me in the church. Music is still a very, very important in my faith practice.
Yeah.
The Bible and I have a complicated relationship. It's a struggle, you know.
Understand. Yep.
But I know in my bones what's true for me is that I was created with purpose, and that God loves me, and He has been with me through every part of my journey. So I am still figuring out what that means every day, and making an attempt to introduce that God to my children as well, and hoping that He reveals Himself to them in a way that is life-giving and real. So yeah,
that's cool. Do you what about like church? I mean, that's always dicey for for queer people
Yeah.
of faith is like
Mhm.
church is always challenging. I'm so grateful that I get to co-pastor this funky little progressive church where I can be fully
Mhm.
out, even out not only about my sexuality and be married to a man, but also out about my progressive understanding of God. Like I can actually get up and say what would be considered heretical in other churches. Have you
Mhm.
explored church? Have you found a church that works for you? Are you still looking? What are your thoughts on church for you and your family?
Yeah, I will be very honest. I would not attend church as often as I do if I didn't have children.
Mm,
It is important to me not to direct their faith or tell them what it should look like, how I was
mhm.
raised, but I do want to expose them to faith.
Yeah.
And so my husband Ty and I, here we are in Indianapolis, Indiana, the buckle of the Bible Belt, and how do we find a church? Ironically, there are several options here that are very affirming. We go to Luke's United Methodist Church. It's a very, very old Methodist church on the north side of Indianapolis. They're wildly affirming. They have queer staff. Um, and we just, when I first started going there, I had been thrown out of my large mega church, quite literally,
Mm,
many years ago. And I just kind of sat with bandages all over
mm.
myself in the
Yeah.
pews for a few years and tried to understand if I could be safe in a church again. And I think in this environment that we found, I do feel that I am, and my faith has had a chance to breathe and evolve. But it is a wildly affirming church. I think that's really important.
Mhm.
I'm floored. You mentioned the people that have connected with me after Through the Long Night was released. I'm floored with how many people. Okay, as a queer person, faith is still important to you. Great, but a lot of them are still in non-affirming churches. I'm like, guys, get out.
Mm,
I think
mhm.
as a baseline, you've got to be in an environment that you are safe and that affirms who you are,
Yeah.
affirms your creation and
Mm,
your right to be a person of faith of equal standing. So I've started from that point. My husband and I both in this faith community, and I'm thankful for it. But I find my faith practice is tied to things outside of the church much more at this point in the journey,
mhm.
and that's been life giving and okay, very peaceful as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so you talk about your kids. What has life been like for your kids on this side of the closet door? I mean, for you to talk about, like, give us the time frame. How long now has it been since your divorce? And maybe tell us how old your kids were when that happened, and kind of give us a time frame.
Sure. So I have three children of my own. My oldest is 12. I've got 12, 10, 7.
Mhm.
So 5 years ago, they were
Mm,
7, 5, 2,
okay. Mhm.
So they were pretty little.
Yeah.
And I will just briefly mention at this point, when I say that, I was so worried about my kids. A lot of people that have come to me since this project has come out, or even who've been listening to my How to Find a Keep a Gay Man podcast for a long time, they'll say, well, I want to wait till my kids are older so they
Yep.
understand. I
Yep.
would argue that that is much harder.
Mm,
Um, I'm thankful that my children were young enough that, they didn't, I think that we had time and space to heal and learn new things and build a new life. I think it was less disruptive because they were so
mm,
young. So I
mhm.
am thankful for that.
Yeah.
My youngest child doesn't really remember when my husband was
Mm,
in her life. And I think
yeah.
that's a blessing. There wasn't this huge adjustment for her.
Mhm.
But I told my kids, even at that age, that I love their mother very much and we would always be a family. Again, I give Stephanie a lot of credit. It was
Yeah.
important to both of us that we told our children we would always be a family. It just looked different.
Mhm.
But I love their mother and always would. And I am their dad and always will be. But daddy is gay. And this is what that means. I am designed by God to be in a relationship with another man. And I'm going to continue to be your dad, and everything's going to be okay.
Mm,
And they had some questions, even as little as they were. But now my kids go with us to Pride, and I've got two girls. They hit the jackpot. Let's be serious. I'm the dad that shops with them and does their hair, and they want to have the sleepovers at our house because their gay dads are way more fun. Like we really, it has been a full circle with the kids, and um, they're thriving. They're doing really well, and they are um, just smart, well-rounded, interesting people.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm so proud of them. But the kids are doing great. It's been a journey like anything else, but at the end of 5 years, I'm really amazed at where they are.
Talk to me a little bit about, you've mentioned several times kind of getting kicked out of your church, the rejection that you experienced, that is not uncommon, unfortunately. But I mean, we are not inoculated from that. It hurts. It can be devastating. It can be crushing. How have you dealt with that? What has it been like for you? What might you say to other people who, as they are coming out, have to deal with being rejected, and kind of how to handle other people's expectations as they are coming out?
Yeah, and that to this day is maybe the hardest part for me.
Yeah.
My life was the church. I mean, even as a lay person, as an adult, the large church that I served at, I mean, I was on a worship team, small group, men's Bible study. All of our friends were in the church. I mean, it was our entire life.
Yep.
And it is not an exaggeration to say it overnight, everyone was gone. And so I think that I was not prepared for the severity of the rejection that was going to occur when I made these decisions that I did. And to this day, I don't understand the severity of it. It was really intense. But what I will say to people that are processing that part of their journey is they're, maybe faced with making similar decisions. Over time, it took a long time, but what I really began to realize, what's clear to me now, is that anyone that was in my life that wasn't really for me, didn't really love me unconditionally, that relationship was not real. It was not life-giving, not really. They were not really in my, so, at first you process it as this huge loss, and because it is, but years later, I'm able to see that my life was built with, a deck of cards. I had a lot of people in my life that liked the version of me that was palatable to them, or the version of me that aligned with their theology. And when it was clear that I was not that person anymore, they were just gone. So I think that the focus needs to be on surrounding yourself with people that really do love you and that are willing to walk the journey with you, that are fully affirming of you. That doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with everything that you say, but people that are actually in real relationship with you. And that is difficult and it takes time. But a really important part of the process.
Yeah. I get it. My life was also 100% church. I mean, I was employed by a church for 20 years. It was our whole world. So,
Sure.
and I don't know about your former wife's experience, but it was similar for my former wife, because she also it was her whole world too. It was our children's whole world. And it's interesting. I have found that, and this sucks. It just sucks for wives who do not support their gay spouse as they come out, for wives that kind of like are more against us and more vocally kind of play the role of the victim and make it like that horrible, awful sinner. Look what he did to me. They often find a lot of support and love and encouragement in the church. But if a spouse is more like your wife, your former wife, or my former wife, and are more like, well, we've kind of evolved along with them, and we are going to be at least supportive, publicly, and kind of like, we're doing this as a family, like a TED Talk, or the way that Stephanie was with you. I don't know, but the church has a harder time with that, because they don't quite know what to do with that. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, this is wrong. You're not supposed to support that kind of a man. You're not supposed to be an ally to that kind of a husband. So it's rough.
Stephanie says that when it was clear to friends of ours that she was not interested in sitting around and shooting at me verbally, they were so confused they just were gone as well. So the loss was really intense for her too. And
yes. And that's tragic. It's tragic because the spouses need so much support, and there's just not a ton of support out there for spouses in these situations either.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Let's turn a corner into a little bit of a conversation on kind of just in general, these mixed orientation marriages. I think people are fascinated by them. And they're fascinating, aren't they? And there's a lot more out there than people realize. But I think more and more people are kind of waking up to the reality that they're out there. We're seeing more mixed orientation marriages depicted in movies, and there's books and podcasts and things out there about them. Thankfully,
Yeah.
we're starting to see ourselves represented more frequently in media. And for those who don't know, I'd say a huge part of my nonprofit work is devoted to working with the queer spouse in these mixed orientation marriages. I've done 8 or 9 support groups now, worked with almost 50 different men in these situations, and then I have 30 plus clients that I see individually, many of whom are in these mixed orientation marriages. And in my work, I mean, I have lots and lots of thoughts and feelings, which I won't necessarily articulate all right now, but I would love to have a conversation with you about some of your thoughts on the matter, because you've lived in this. You also, I'm sure, are having lots of conversations with people about this as people reach out to you. But there's just, I guess, the basic question, divorce versus staying, people, what are your thoughts about, can a gay man stay in a mixed orientation marriage and even be healthy? Is it possible? What are your thoughts about that?
I will start off by saying that I think it's only fair for me to say that I speak only from my own experience.
Great.
In my own experience, I got to the place where I was not going to be any kind of healthy staying in a romantic, sexual, married relationship with a woman.
Yeah.
I got to a point where that was really, I believe, no longer possible for me. And so I made the difficult decisions that I did. And now I wake up beside my beautiful husband every morning, and I can't believe nothing. I wake up in the morning now and nothing's wrong. And I really am at peace. I have been through really intense pain and loss. And there are parts of me that will be tender the rest of my life because of the divorce.
Yeah.
I think that healing process for both of us will be for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
But I have learned over time that that's a pain that I carry with me that doesn't control me or destroy my peace. I think that if I had not made the difficult decisions that I did, that would not be the case. I think that my peace would be completely destroyed, and I would have continued I was going down a path where I was becoming a shell of who I really am. And so for me, when I meet with other men in mixed orientation marriages, as I have a lot more frequently in the last year, there are some commonalities to the story. And one thing that I always notice in men that are still in a marriage and maybe at some sort of a crossroads is they are, most of the time, in my experience, pretty miserable and in a lot of pain. And if you can get to, I don't think that that's a place that is sustainable. If you can get to a place where, you're a specific place on the spectrum, maybe that allows you to do that, or maybe you've been married for 40 years and it's not worth it at that point. I don't know. There are a lot of circumstances that maybe you are able to put together that make sense for you. I would say in general, it grieves me when men are in these situations. And it's hard for me to say that I believe you can live your best life staying there. I cannot, I look at my life now and I cannot believe how far I've come in 5 years. I don't recognize my life. It's completely crazy. It's not without challenge. It's not without pain. It's not been without loss or difficulty, but it has been filled with joy and beauty and completely unexpected blessing. And I now, as I sit here today, don't carry shame or intense daily pain. I identify as a healed and whole person. And I would trade nothing for that,
I noticed that in your bio, and I really I was curious about it and intrigued by it, I'll say, is where you said, through a period of deconstruction and reconstruction of what he believed, he emerged a healed and whole queer person of faith and rebuilt his life. That's a really powerful statement, Matt, to be able to write that and then to stand behind it and say, healed and whole. Those are powerful words.
Yeah. Not without scars.
No,
healed and whole.
I don't hear that. One of the things, I want to stay here for a minute. One of the things that I I love that you are saying for me, I'm not trying to impose this on anyone else.
Mhm.
And I absolutely agree with you that like every story is different. This is what I tell every single person I work with. Your story is yours. You have to look at your life. You have to look at your situation. You have to look at your marriage, your children, your everything, and
Mhm.
then make decisions, right? And yes, your decisions also impact other people. This is true. We cannot deny it. All of this is true at the same time. I'm a big proponent of both, and it's not either or, it's
Mhm.
always both and all of it
Yeah.
belongs. Um, but there is often I mean, you've heard this a million times, I promise. There's an accusation of selfishness, self-centered,
Mhm.
selfish. You're being selfish. You're making this all about you and your wants and needs. I mean, have you heard that before, Matt?
Oh my. Just a
Yes.
few times.
I'm sorry. I should have issued a content warning before I said that. But I've heard it 100,000 times too. I hear it every single day on Twitter whenever this comes up. That selfish, selfish, selfish. Look what you did, and it was all about you and la la la. But what I heard you say, and what I want to highlight for anyone listening, is what you were talking about. Your own story is that you were kind of walking down a very dark pathway and you saw a trajectory ahead. Is what I think I heard you say.
Mhm.
That was
Absolutely.
not a healthy trajectory. It was a kind of dark pathway that was not
For
going to end
myself,
well. Yes.
for myself, or anyone attached to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
I remember in the maybe year before I made the decision to end my marriage and to come out publicly. I remember that there's a number of things, and I won't go into all of them, but there were also signs of that in my life too. I just saw that I was becoming more and more depressed. I was becoming more and more anxious. I was seeing this kind of dark path ahead, and I wasn't suicidal. But I don't know what the future looked like. And I remember seeing there's a musical called Fun Home that's based on a graphic novel by Alison Bechdel. Anyone should go read it. It's fabulous. She's a lesbian cartoonist, Alison Bechdel, and
Okay.
she tells the true story of her coming out in college and finding around that same time that her father was a closeted gay man who had never come out. And this is not a spoiler because it's an old story and everyone knows it. But her father then kills himself by stepping in front of a truck, and that resonates all through her life and all through this family and I remember seeing that musical, reading the graphic novel, and just going, is I don't want to be him. I don't want to be him. I don't want to ruin that my family the way he ruined his family. I don't, and I could see myself reflected in that tortured, closeted gay man, and how many people like that have there been in the course of this world, and I
Yeah.
don't know, that happens more than we know. These tortured, closeted, middle-aged men who just
I know.
hanging on by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah.
It's just not a healthy trajectory. Having said that, I know, I will say one. I know one man who is fully gay, not bisexual, not pansexual. He's gay. He's in his mid 60s, and he has chosen to stay with his wife. I work with him every month, and I think he's very healthy. I do. And he and his wife have made this decision. And he checks in with her every single day, and they are so, so, so intentional. And so he's got children and grandchildren. Part of it, I think, has to do with his stage of life. Part of it has to do with how deeply spiritual he is and how in tune he is with his wife, and how self-reflective he is. And he's literally got, it's amazing. He's got a spreadsheet where he's got like quality of life, um, component.
Metrics.
Yeah, metrics. And
Wow.
every day he grades it green, red, and yellow, about all these different metrics. And he's like, today I'm okay today. And so he's like, if it starts getting too many yellows or reds, I'm going to check in. I don't know. Maybe someday I will come out, but for today, I'm okay. And I'm like, that's amazing. This man is so, so in touch, so spiritual, so in touch with his wife. And I'm like, and maybe it's because he's 65 years old and he doesn't need to come bursting out of the closet. I don't know. He's done it this long. Maybe he's going to be okay. But
God bless.
he also doesn't say this is it forever. He says this is it for today. And that's one of the ways he makes this mentally okay for him, right? And maybe this one man is really one in a million kind of person who can actually do this healthy. But I will say, Matt, 98% of the people I work with eventually do end up leaving their marriages and coming out of the closet, because it does seem to be a healthier path for them. And that's just
For you to live this. Yeah.
what I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree.
But the other thing that I was going to mention is just this idea of, and I'm sure that you have seen this and maybe saw it in your own life, this compartmentalization that we all live with, certainly before we come out. And no matter what path you choose, we have to learn to integrate all these pieces of ourselves as fathers, as husbands, as gay men, as spiritual people, as whatever work we do. If we can just somehow bring them all together, that's what has to happen. That's the ultimate thing. And I don't know if you can somehow stay married in that and be a fully integrated human being. Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know if that's possible, but if you integration. Yeah.
I mentioned that I can't believe how far I've come in 5 years, and I look at my life now and don't recognize it. I think one of the biggest components of that is the integration piece.
Mm-hmm.
I am an out gay man. I'm out professionally.
Yes.
I'm everywhere I go. I'm who I am, and I don't code switch. I don't change clothes to fit in different environments anymore.
Yes.
I am just who I am. And that has been the most life-giving thing. I agree. That's a really important part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great place to kind of maybe begin to wrap it up. We have about 8 minutes left. Just this, I love that for you. And I love that for me too. There's something so life-giving about I remember the day after I came out, the day after the big email went out to everybody. And there was this sense of like, well, I guess it's done now. Like what's done is done. And I felt just free. I just felt this, like I had this big grin on my face the morning after when I woke up and realized what had happened. And I remember having this feeling of like, I just have to tell the truth now. No matter what else, I just get to be me and just live my life. And there's such a freedom there, isn't there?
Oh my gosh, yes.
What
Absolutely.
you said about no longer code switching. I mean, that's powerful.
Yeah. And no longer feeling like you have to apologize. I feel very powerful as a queer man out in public. And I never dreamed I'd feel that way. And it's been a beautiful transformation.
What has it been like for you coming out of kind of like evangelical, white, middle class, family, into gay world? What has that been like? A lot of the men who talk to me and are contemplating coming out feel a little worried. They're like, and some of them are very like kind of straight passing and masculine, and they're kind of like they worry even about using the word gay. They're like they fear that somehow they're going to have to somehow start dancing on a pride float in booty shorts and crop tops. And I'm like, no, you just get to be you. It's
so not the first year.
Right. You know what I mean? There's like this fear that like gay spaces are so completely foreign to someone who's never been in spaces like that. So what has that been like for you? That's a big question.
We talked about this earlier. We could be nothing but honest. I mean, I think it was the first year I was fully out. It was just jarring experience.
Totally.
I mean, I went to my first Pride in 2019, right before that group met, and I was just like, "Oh my Lord! Like,
what is happening?
Where do I fit here?" And
and
if you're over 40, you're a daddy, and there's so many things to learn. And oh my word! But I think that just like anything else, you eventually find your people. I think now it's so funny. Now when I'm around straight people for too long, it exhausts me because I just don't do that anymore. Like now I feel like I've rebuilt my life with a lot of queer people and my closest friends are queer. And I cannot believe how much fun we have. And it's just so much easier, I mean, so I think that's been really amazing. I also am not going to sugarcoat the fact that it's going to be hard at first. So I talk about this a little bit in the through the long night piece. Like when I first started to date, it was frightening. It was hard. It was not easy. I think that if you are a gay man over 30, especially if you're one that grew up in the church, you have been through significant trauma, period. And you have dealt with it or are dealing with it, or you have not, and you're self-medicating. And as we sit here in the year of our Lord 2024, it's been my experience that the majority of those I meet in our community are still in that bucket, that have not really done the difficult healing work of dealing with their trauma, the shame that they've carried their whole life, all that kind of stuff, and are ready to receive and give love in a healthy relationship. I think finding people that have done that in the gay community is, in my experience, that has been a challenging part of the process. But when you find them, oh my word, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth the journey.
Awesome. Tell me about the nonprofit that you and Ty have started and how people can find it.
So the Technicolor Project is the name of the nonprofit. And I say we started it. It's very new, just in the last couple of months. So we really have a passion. He also was in a mixed orientation marriage, also had a 10-year marriage and has 3 kids. We have identical stories in that sense, but the way that we grew up is polar opposite. And so my memoir podcast was called Through the Long Night. His is called In Search of Dawn, and it's currently in production. It's going to be out this fall. So that we have these, memoir pieces to really kind of tell our story in more depth. And we also have a speaking platform to tell our story together. And really the work that we want to be involved in, it's tied to the tagline, helping queer people of faith build lives of freedom and peace, because we know that it's possible from our experience. And we want to share that, that as queer people, we have a place in the church. As queer people, we are people that are loved by God and can have a faith walk, faith journey that is life-giving and that enriches your lives in significant ways. So we're just want to be involved in those conversations and are still building the platform, but have started doing some speaking on that. And in anticipation of the release of this project this fall, we'll be ramping that up quite a bit. So be watching for that. But it's really been an amazing thing to be able to do this with my husband. It's very unique, and it feels incredibly redemptive and life-giving, and we're excited for what it's going to be in time.
That is beautiful. I love it. Well, I think that's about all I have today. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining me. Thank you for the podcast. It's beautiful. Tons and tons of people are listening and really finding a lot of hope and healing in it. I am sharing it with literally everybody who comes to me with mixed orientation marriage situations. I'm like, listen to this, you'll love it. And I know a lot of people are watching today. We've had like 140 people watching this whole time. I don't know. I think it's streaming on my Twitter feed, so there may be a lot of people there, and also on Common Sanctuary's YouTube and Facebook Live. So,
and I want to just say really quick, for those of you that have listened to it, thank you so much. I'm just really honored by that. And if you would not mind rating and reviewing it on the platform that you listen to it on, that will help it reach larger audiences. And I thank you, and I welcome any contact from you as well.
Awesome. And people can find you on Instagram at Matthew W. Heincker and at How to Find and Keep a Gay Man. Any other contact information or platforms that you want to promote?
I'll be looking for the Technicolor Project's release, probably in late July, early August, and Through the Long Night is out, but its companion piece, My Husband's Story, In Search of Dawn, will be out this fall on the same platforms. So, yep.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.